The cage door was already open when I reached it. I had ridden through half the night on the river road, my hunters strung out behind me in the dark, following a report 3 days cold, 6 women gone from the crossing at Saltgate in a single moon, and before them a dozen more, and before them a whole season of daughters and wives and herb gatherers who walked out to the water and never walked back. We found the wagon in a stand of black alders, its wheels sunk in mud, its team long gone. It was a slaver's wagon. I had seen enough of them in my years to know the shape without a torch. The low iron cage bolted to the bed, the straw packed thick to muffle sound, the ring of chain scars worn pale into the wood. And it was empty, the bolt was thrown back. The great lock hung open on its hasp, and when I lifted it to the light I saw the thing that made the hair rise along my arms. It had not been broken. It had been picked. Someone had worked the wards of that lock from the outside with a patience that spoke of practice, sprung it clean, and let out whatever the slavers had caged there, and then, for a reason I could not name, had left a single sprig of green laid across the straw where a captive's head would have rested. A common thing, a weed. Crushed a little between finger and thumb, so its sharp, cool smell still hung in the air over the reek of fear and old iron. "They ran," said Bevan, my huntsman, crouching at the wheel ruts. "Slavers cut the horses loose and bolted, left the goods." "No," I said. "The slavers did not open that lock." I had been Alpha King of Elder for 11 years, and in 11 years I had learned to trust my nose over any man's counsel. My wolf was up under my skin, hackling, reading the little clearing the way a scholar reads a page, and the story it read was not the one Bevan told. There were 2 trails away from that wagon, not one. The slavers' trail was loud and clumsy, panicked men crashing north through the brush. The other was a whisper. A single set of feet, small and sure, that had come toward the cage from the wood, worked the lock, gathered the freed like a shepherd gathers strays, and led them away west into the elder wood along paths no slaver would ever find. I stood over that empty cage with the picked lock cold in my hand, and I understood 2 things at once, and both of them were splinters under the skin. The first was that a ring of men had been stealing the women of my kingdom off my own roads for the better part of a year, and I had not caught a single one of them. The second was that someone else had been catching them for me, someone unarmed, someone who left a weed behind like a signature or a prayer. "Bring the lock," I told Bevan, "and say nothing of the west trail to the men." He looked up at me. "You don't trust the men." "I trust the men," I said, and it was almost true. "I don't trust the road between here and my hall." Because that was the other splinter, the one I had been turning over for weeks and had not let myself finish. My hunters were good. My scouts were the best in the north. And still the ring had slipped us every time, always a day ahead, always warned, always gone before we arrived, as though someone at a table close to mine were reading our plans aloud to the very men we hunted. I had told myself it was ill luck. Standing over that picked lock, I stopped telling myself that. We tracked the slavers' loud trail north till dawn and lost it at the salt flats, where a barge had put out on the tide. I let them go. It cost me to do it. Every part of me wanted to swim the channel and drag the barge back by its keel, but a barge could be met at its landing, and to chase it now was to chase noise while the quiet trail went cold. So at first light I did the thing no king is supposed to do. I sent my hunters home to the Grey Hall with orders to keep hunting the roads and to speak of nothing, and I turned my own horse west, alone, and followed the whisper into the elder wood. The elder wood is old the way stone is old. The wolves of elder do not den in it. Even my own beast went soft-footed and low-eared under those trees, not from fear but from a kind of respect, the way you lower your voice in a place where the dead are thick. I lost the footprints within a mile. The ground went to moss and root, but I did not need footprints. Whoever had led the freed women through here had done it before, many times, and the wood remembered them. There was a way through it that was not a road and was not chance. A bent branch here, a stone turned mossy side down there, a notch in a trunk no woodcutter would make. a trail laid by someone who wanted it invisible to strangers and plain to the desperate. I read it the way I read the wagon. It took me 2 days. It brought me, at the far green edge of the wood, to a village. Thistledown was the kind of place a king forgets he owns. A double handful of turf-roofed houses along a stream, a mill, a smokehouse, sheep on the common, poor and clean and quiet. I came out of the trees at dusk with my hood up and my crown left behind in my saddlebag, and I stood at the tree line a long while, watching, and my wolf watched with me, and the smell of the whole valley poured over us, sheep and peat smoke and bread, and the green wet breath of the stream. And under all of it, threaded through it, was the smell from the cage. Crushed green, sharp and cool, the weed on the straw. It came from a low stone house at the village's edge, a house with drying bundles hung under its eaves and a garden gone to a healer's tangle, and my wolf, which had tracked that scent across 2 days of wood as a hunter tracks a mark, lifted its head and did a thing it had never done in 11 years. It stopped hunting. I cannot tell you plainer than that, and I have tried in the years since to find better words, and there are none. All my life my wolf has known 2 kinds of thing in the world, pack and prey. Everything I have ever hunted, it hunted with a rising heat, a gathering to spring. And now it stood at the edge of that poor valley with the scent of its quarry full in its nose, and instead of gathering to spring it laid its ears back and lay down, refused, would not take her. As though it had crossed a whole kingdom to bring a wanderer home, and had only now at the threshold understood that the wanderer was not lost at all, that she was the home, and the door, and the light in the window, and it would sooner die than raise a hand against her. I did not understand it. I want that on the record, because everything that came after came from a man who did not yet understand what had happened to him at that tree line. I only knew that the hand I had crossed a kingdom to find was in that stone house, and that my whole body had gone strange and slow, and that I had to see whose it was. I went down as the last light failed. I meant to watch the house, not to knock, but I had been 3 days without proper sleep, and my mind was on the window and not on my feet, and I put my boot wrong on the wet stone of the garden path, and something old in my leg, a wound from a border fight years gone that never healed clean, turned under me, and I went down into the healer's herb beds with a curse I am not proud of. The door opened before I had my hand under me, and a woman came out into the dusk with a rushlight in her fist and a short iron paring knife held low and ready at her hip, and she looked at the great cloaked shape sprawled in her sage, and she did not scream, and she did not run. She said, "You're bleeding on my rue." That was the first thing Sorrel of Thistledown ever said to me. I have been called many things by many people. I have been feared and flattered and lied to across a dozen years of holding a hard kingdom in a hard land, and I had grown so used to the way people arrange their faces when a king comes near, the fear, or the wanting, that I had forgotten there was any other way for a face to look at me. Hers looked at me the way a healer looks at a fallen thing, measuring the trouble, weighing whether it would bite. No fear, no wanting, just a steady gray attention and a small knife she plainly knew how to use, and behind her in the low warm dark of the house, the smell of green, and the smell, my wolf had it before I did, of other people. Many other people. Women, crowded and silent, gone still as hares the instant a stranger fell in the garden. "I'm not here to harm you," I said. "Men who mean no harm don't fall out of the elder wood after dark," she said. "The wood doesn't let them. It let you, so either it's tired of you or you know its ways. Which?" I followed a trail through it. "Whose?" "Yours," I said. "You left a sprig of rue on the straw of a slaver's cage 2 days east of here. You picked the lock and led 6 women west along a path no hunter of mine could find. You have done it, I think, many times, and I have hunted the men who fill those cages for the better part of a year, and never once caught them, while you, alone with a paring knife, have been emptying them behind my back." I watched her face while I said it, because I am a hunter and I read faces, and I waited for the thing every guilty person does, the flinch, the shift of the eyes to the door, the quick lie assembling itself behind the teeth. It did not come. What came instead was worse, and I have never forgotten it. Her gray eyes went over me once, slow, from my mud-ruined boots to the sword. She had surely marked under my cloak to the fall of the hood over my face. And then they went hard and old and unafraid, and she stepped back into her own doorway so her body filled it, so that whatever was behind her in the dark would have to come through her first. So, she said quietly, they finally sent one of their lords to do the collecting himself. I understood then. She thought I was one of them. She thought the ring had a lord at its head. She was righter than she knew, and that the lord had come at last to her door for the one who'd been costing him his cargo. And knowing it, believing it, with a king's wolf shape looming out of the dark and a garden between her and any help, she did not weep, and she did not beg, and she did not run. She lifted the little knife an inch and set her feet, one small woman between an alpha king and a houseful of the taken, and she said, "You'll not have a single one of them, not while I stand. I have led warriors. I have stood in the shield line at Viharn Ford with the river running red past my knees. I have seen courage of the loud kind, the kind that sings and charges. I had never in my life seen the other kind, the kind that has already counted the cost and found it too high and pays it anyway, alone in a dark garden with a paring knife, for strangers, until I saw it in the doorway of a healer's house, and it went through me like cold water, and my wolf, which had lain down at the tree line, pressed itself flat to the earth of me in something I can only call reverence. I put back my hood. I do not wear my crown into the wilds, but there is no hiding what I am. My kind carry it in the eyes when we mean to be seen, a low light that no man of common blood can hold, and I let it come, and I said, I am Torin, Alpha King of Elder, and I did not come to collect. I came because, for a year, I have failed the women of my own roads, and someone I have never met has been doing the work I could not, and I had to know whose hands they were. I saw her believe me. I saw it the way you see ice go over a pond all at once from one edge, a stillness spreading. Not because a king's word is worth more than another man's. I think she'd have thrown my rank back in my teeth. She believed me because my wolf was showing, plain in the eyes, and hers. I learned this only later, had been broken by wolves once, long ago, when the ring first came to Thistledown and took her sister off the river road and left her nothing to bury. And she had learned in the years since to read a wolf's true face the way a shepherd reads weather. And what she read in mine was not a lord's hunger, it was shame, a king's shame naked, which she had surely never thought to see. She did not lower the knife all the way, but she lowered it. Sorrel, she said, there's no lord's title after it. My mother was a hedge witch and my grandmother before her, and we've kept this valley's births and deaths and broken bones for 3 lifetimes. That's all I am. That is not all you are, I said. May I see them? The women. I give you my word as king and as wolf, no harm to any soul under your roof. And if you turn me away at this door, I will go and hunt my ring another way and never speak of this place to any living man. She looked at me a long moment, then she stood aside. There were 9 of them in that low, warm room, packed onto the healer's cot and her floor and the bench by her hearth, 9 women of my kingdom, thin, marked, some of them very young and some of them not, all of them looking at me with the flat wariness of creatures that have learned what men are for. A miller's wife 3 villages east, gone 2 moons, her wrists still ringed with rope-burned sorrel, had been dressing with the very rue I bled on. A pair of sisters from the salt flats. An old grandmother who had gone out for reeds and been taken because, sorrel told me lo, the ring took whoever was slowest and would not be missed by anyone with a sword. They were the freight of that emptied cage, and of 2 cages before it, and sorrel had them here, feeding them from a healer's poor stores, mending them and waiting, always waiting, for the dark of the moon and the safe night to move them west through the elder wood to the free holds beyond the mountains, where the ring's arm did not reach, and a stolen woman could begin again under her own name. "You cannot keep doing this," I said, and I heard how it sounded even as I said it, a king telling a healer her business, and I saw her spine go straight. "I have kept doing it for 4 years," she said, "since they took my sister and I had no one to keep doing it for me. Don't tell me what I cannot do, my lord. Tell me instead why a king's hunters have never once caught the men who bring the wagons, when a hedge witch with a paring knife catches their cargo every single time." And there it was, laid on her healer's hearth in 9 words, the splinter I had not let myself finish. "Because," I said slowly, "someone at my table is warning them." Her gray eyes held mine. "Yes," she said, "I've long thought so. The wagons always run the roads your hunters aren't watching, always, as if they had the watch orders read to them at supper." She set down her rushlight. "I know the ring, my lord. Better than you do, I'd wager. I've been pulling its teeth for 4 years while you've been chasing its shadow. I know where they land the barges. I know the salt house at Saltgate where they hold the taken before the sea crossing. I know the man in the port who does their buying, a fat trader called Balger who wears a merchant's chain and smells of the sea. What I have never been able to learn, what has kept me to picking locks in the dark instead of ending it, is the name of the Lord above Balger, the one who feeds him your watch orders, the one whose protection has made the whole rotten thing untouchable." I looked at the 9 women on her floor. I looked at the paring knife she had set down within reach of her hand, at the drying rue under her eaves, at the 4 years of a life spent alone in the dark, undoing a wrong that I, with all my hunters and all my haul, had let stand. And I felt the last of my kingly certainty go out of me like breath, and something harder and better come in behind it. "Then we will learn it," I said. "Together. You know the ring, I have the men and the law. Give me the Lord above Balger, and I will give you the end of the wagons, not one at a time in the dark, but all of them at once forever." She did not take my hand on it. She was not a woman to take a king's hand on his say-so, and I have loved her for that every day since. She said only, "You'll forgive me if I don't trust a wolf yet. I've buried what trusting one cost me." "I would think less of you if you did trust me," I said. "Trust me by what I do, not before." And that was where it began, not with a claiming, not with a bond struck like lightning in a great hall. It began with a king and a healer on either side of a poor hearth, agreeing to hunt a thing together, one of them not yet willing to turn her back on the other, and both of them right not to be sure. I did not go home to the gray hall. If a lord at my table was feeding the ring my hunter's movements, then the moment I rode back and gave an order, that order would run to Saltgate ahead of me, and Balger would put to sea, and the salt house would stand empty, and the whole year's work would be for nothing. So I did a hard thing. I sent Bevan a bird, my huntsman, the one man in the north I would stake my life on, because he had carried me off Viharn Ford on his own back and asked nothing after. And I told him only this, that I lived, that I was hunting, that he was to trust no order that did not come sealed in my own hand, and that he was to watch the council and mark, quietly, which of them asked after where the king had gone. And I stayed in Thistledown, in a healer's byre on clean straw, a king of the north, while Sorrel taught me the ring I thought I had been hunting. I had thought I understood it, I understood nothing. I had been hunting wagons, Sorrel showed me a web. The wagons were only the coarsest thread of it, the crude end, the snatching of the slow and the poor from country roads. But Balger the trader was buying more than snatched women. He was buying the desperate, 2 girls sold by families a bad winter had broken, widows with no kin and a debt, servants a lord had cast off, buying them with a merchant's smile and papers that made it look like honest hire, and shipping them all out on the same tide to the same buyers across the sea. 4 years Sorrel had spent learning it, which families the ring's factors visited before a hard spring, which inns the bargemen drank in, which Lord Seal she'd once glimpsed, from a hedge, on a paper Balger carried. She had a ledger of it. Not a book she couldn't write past her own name, but a ledger in her head and in the memories of the 9 women behind her and the 40-odd she'd freed before them, every one of whom could point to a face, a chain, a paper, a night. Testimony enough to hang a traitor and topple a lord, if a king could be got to hear it. You had all this, I said, on the 3rd night, and no one to bring it to, because the man you'd bring it to might be the lord above Baljer. Might be any of them, she said. She was grinding something at her table, her back to me, her hands never still. That's what protection buys, my lord, not just safety. It buys the not knowing, buys the whole country shrugging and saying the roads are dangerous and a woman shouldn't walk alone. I've heard your own Reeve say it. A woman shouldn't walk alone, as if the fault were in the walking. She stopped grinding. Her hands had gone still, which I had learned was the only sign she gave when a thing had cut her. My sister walked alone, she said, to the reed beds, in the morning, on a road she'd walked her whole life, and the world decided that made it hers to bear. I did not say I was sorry. Sorry is a coin kings spend too easily and it is worth nothing. I said her name. Sorrel turned. Something moved in her gray eyes that I had not earned. Ren, she said. When we take Baljer, I said, and the Lord above him, it will be in Ren's name. It will be read out in the gray hall before the whole council, in her name and every name after hers, so that the country cannot shrug, so that no Reeve of mine ever again says a woman shouldn't walk alone without choking on it. You have my word as king. She looked at me for a long time. And then she crossed her own floor and did a thing I have turned over in my heart 1,000 times since. She reached out and, without asking, laid 2 fingers against the old wound in my leg, the one that had turned under me in her garden, that I had favored all week and pretended not to. This has never healed, she said. It's healing crooked. Sit. And I, Torin, Alpha King of Elder, who had let no hand but a battle surgeon's near that leg in 6 years, sat down on a healer's bench in a turf-roofed house, and let a hedge witch cut my breeches and lay her green-smelling poultices on an old wound, and my wolf lay down again inside me, and this time it was not reverence, and it was not the strangeness of the tree line. It was the thing those had been the front edge of. It was a lamp lit in a house I had long ago decided was empty. I had been Alpha King 11 years and had told my council I would take no Luna, that I was a hard man for a hard land and had no room in me for it, and I had believed it, and I sat there in the rushlight with her careful fingers working the poison out of 6-year-old flesh, and I felt the whole of that lie go quiet, and I did not tell her. Not then. It would have been a kind of taking to tell her then, when she'd only just stopped holding a knife between us. So I held it. A king holding still under a healer's hands, saying nothing, while the thing that had crossed a kingdom to find her settled at last into its place and lay down and was home. We had 6 nights before the dark of the moon, when Baljer's barge would come up the channel to Saltgate to load the salt house for the sea crossing. That was the night. Sorrel had known its shape for a year. She had meant to spend it doing what she always did, slipping into the salt house in the confusion of the loading and taking out the 2 or 3 she could carry, and losing sleep for a month over the rest. Now we made it something else. I will not set down every turn of what we planned across those 6 nights, because some of it is the ring's own tradecraft, and I'll not teach it to the next such men. But the shape of it was this. Bevan, in secret, would ready 100 of my best on the salt flats, not marched openly, which the lord at my table would hear of and carry to Baljer, but drifted out in 2s and 3s as though on a dozen small errands, to gather in the dunes above the port on the dark of the moon. I would be with them. And Sorrel, I fought her on this for 2 of those 6 nights and lost, because she was right and I was only afraid. Sorrel would go in first, as she always had, into the salt house among the loading, the one face the ring never looked at twice, a poor woman come to buy salt. Because it was her going in that would open the door from within, and because the 40 freed women whose word would hang Baljer would only come out of hiding for her, whom they trusted, and not for 100 wolves of a king they'd been taught to fear. You needn't be the one to go in, I said the last time I tried it. Send me a map of the Salt House, I'll go. They'll smell the wolf on you before you're through the gate, she said, not unkindly. They'll smell the king. I've been walking into that Salt House for 4 years, my lord, and no one has ever once seen me because no one has ever once looked. That is my weapon. It is the only one I have ever had, and it has emptied more cages than your whole guard. Don't ask me to set it down on the one night it matters most. She held my eyes. I've kept myself alive at this longer than you'd have lasted a week. Trust me by what I've done. Isn't that the bargain you offered? It was. I had offered it. And a man who offers that bargain does not get to snatch it back the moment the doing frightens him. So I did the hardest thing I did in all of it, harder than the fight that came after. I said yes. I let the bravest person I have ever known walk into the worst place in my kingdom without me, because it was hers to do and she had earned it 100 times over, and because to have forbidden her, king or no, would have been its own small theft of the freedom I'd sworn I came to defend. But I did one thing more in the last of those 6 nights that I have never regretted. When we knew the traitor's name, for we learned it on the 5th night, and I will come to how, I did not keep it from her to spare her, the way lords are always keeping things from women to spare them. I told her. I laid it on her hearth the moment I had it, because it was as much her hunt as mine more, and she had bought the right to it with 4 years of dark. It cost me to watch her hear it. But she had asked to be trusted by what I did, and this was a thing I could do. Here is how we learned it. Bevan's birds had been coming to me at Thistledown, each one small and sealed, telling me which of my council had asked after the king's absence. Most had asked the honest way, worried, sending scouts, keeping the peace. One had not. One had asked too carefully, and then stopped asking, and then quietly sent his own man south towards Saltgate on a horse foundered from hard riding. My master of roads. The lord who set my hunters watch, who decided each week which stretch of river road would be watched and which left dark. Rennick. A cold, careful man I had raised up myself, whose father had died beside mine at Viharn Ford, whom I had never once thought to doubt because his grief had matched my own. Rennick, who for a year had set my hunters to watch the roads the wagons never ran, and left dark the roads they always did, and told me it was ill luck. Rennick had sold the women of Elder for a merchant's chain of gold, and had done it while wearing my father's friend's face. I do not think I have ever been angrier in my life than I was the night Bevan's last bird made it plain. My wolf wanted the shortest road, wanted to ride into the grey hall, and take Rennick's throat out over my own high table and be done. It was Sorrel who held me to the longer, better road, sitting across her hearth from a king shaking with a killing rage, and saying, quiet and hard, "If you kill him, my lord, you kill a traitor and you free a barge. Let him live to be shown, let his own watch orders be read out, let the freed women name the wagons he sent dark for, and you don't free one barge. You free every road and elder from every man who'd do what he did, because you'll have made it a thing that gets a lord dragged before the whole council in a healer's dead sister's name. Don't spend Wren's name on a killing in a hall. Spend it on the end of the whole trade. That's worth more." She was right. She was always, in those days, the wiser of us, and I the one with the sword and the rage, and I have never met the man fool enough to call that the lesser share. I put the rage away, not down, away, banked, for the one night it would be of use, and we kept to the longer road. The dark of the moon came cold and starless off the sea. I lay in the dunes above Saltgate with 100 of my best strung silent along the ridge, Bevan at my shoulder, the Salt House below us, a long low shape against the black water, and the barge a blacker shape at its wharf, torches moving on the dock as the loading began. And somewhere in that torchlight, a small figure in a poor woman's shawl walked up to the Salt House gate with an empty basket on her arm, come to buy salt, and no one looked at her twice, and my whole heart went down that hill with her while my body lay still as stone in the sand, because it was hers to do and I had sworn. I will tell the fight quickly, because a fight is the least of what that night was. The signal was to be a lamp in the Salt House's high window, Sorrel's lamp, the one she carried always, lit and set where the ridge could see it, when she had the inner door open and the freed women gathered and clear of the loading floor. We waited. The loading went on. A torchlit hour crawled by, and then another, and the barge began to take on its terrible cargo, change shapes moving up the gangplank in the dark, and beside me Bevan breathed, "My Lord, if the lamp doesn't come." And I did not answer him because I did not trust my voice, because every part of me was screaming to go now, and the only thing holding me on that ridge was the promise I had made her. That I would trust her by what she did, and wait for her light, and not throw away the whole hunt and every woman on that barge because I could not bear the waiting. The lamp came. High in the Salt House window, small and gold and steady, her lamp, the one she'd carried into that place for 4 years, lit at last not to slip 2 women out in secret, but to bring a king's 100 down on the whole rotten thing at once. I have seen many beautiful things. I have seen the aurora over the northern ice and the whole pack running under a full moon. I have never seen anything as beautiful as that one small light in that black window, because it meant she was alive and she had done it, and the waiting was over. "Now," I said, an elder came down off the ridge like the sea coming over a wall. We took the wharf before Balger's men understood the dunes had teeth. We took the gangplank and the barge, and cut the chains of every soul on it with the loading still half done. Balger himself, fat and quick for all his fat, went for the channel in a skiff, and Bevan took him out of it dripping and cursing and clutching, even then, at the merchant's chain of gold about his neck as though it could still buy him anything. There was blood on that wharf, and I'll not pretend otherwise. The ring's men fought, and some died, and I am not sorry for the ones who did. But the Salt House itself, the inner rooms, the loading floor, that was Sorrel's, and it was won without a single blow, because she had done what 100 wolves could not. She had walked in unseen and opened it from within and gathered the frightened into the one high room and lit her lamp. And by the time I came up those stairs 3 at a time with my sword still red, she was standing in that room's door the exact way she'd stood in her own that first night, one small woman between the taken and the world. Except that this time the world coming through the door was mine, and hers, and safe. She had a cut over her brow, where a bargeman had caught her before Bevan's people reached the upper floor. It was the only wound on her, and she'd already bound it herself with a strip of her own shawl and gone straight back to the frightened women, murmuring the low, even words she'd murmured to 9 of them on her own floor, and she did not even turn when I came up the stairs. She said over her shoulder, "You're late, my lord," and bleeding on the floor. And my wolf and the whole of me laid down at her feet in that Salt House and was home. We brought them all to the Grey Hall. Not in chains, the freed, I mean. I would not have the women of my kingdom come into their king's hall as freight one last time. So we came slow, on the high road in daylight, 40 and more of them, and their families gathering along the way as word ran ahead, and Balger and his men in irons at the rear where the whole country could see which way the chains ran now. And Rennick, cold, careful Rennick, who had not fled, because he did not yet know we had him, because he still believed the barge had put to sea, and the king had died somewhere in the wilds, and his secret had gone into the water with him. Rennick met us on the steps of my own hall with a lord's smile and a lord's mourning face, ready, I do not doubt, to grieve me handsomely and rule in my stead. I let him smile the whole way up the steps. I let him take my hand at the top and press it and call me lord and say how the council had feared me lost. And then I turned to the great doors of the Grey Hall, thrown open, the whole council within and the freed women coming up the steps behind me in the sun. And I said, in the voice I keep for the shield line, loud enough for the last soul in the square to hear it. My lords of Elder, for a year the women of our roads have been stolen and sold across the sea, and your hunters could not catch the men who took them, because your master of roads set the watch each week to leave the wagons' roads dark. Rennick has sold the freeborn of Elder for a chain of gold. I have his own hand on the watch orders, and the barge master Balger in irons to name him, and 40 women he sent into the dark to name the roads. And I have the one who caught what all of us together could not. I have seen a man's face fall from a lord's smile to 100 things in the space of a single breath. Renix did. He reached once for the old grief we shared, the father's dead at Viharn Ford, Torin. And I did not let him have it. You will not say his name to me, I said. You wore my father's friend's face to do this. You do not get to hide behind it now. And then I did the thing I had promised on a healer's hearth. I did not have my guards drag Rennick down. I stood aside on the steps of my own hall and I said, the charge will not be read by me. It will be read by the woman who has been ending your trade with her bare hands for 4 years, while my council called it ill luck. My lords, hear Sorrel of Thistledown. She came up the steps. I have crowned king's sons and received the swords of border lords, and I have never seen a hall go as silent as the gray hall went when a small woman in a healer's plain shawl, with a bound cut over her brow and her hands stained green, came up the steps past a captive trader and a trader lord, and stood in the great doors, and looked at the council of elder without one grain of fear. They had every one of them spent a year shrugging that the roads were dangerous. Some of them, I think, had spent it worse. And they looked at the hedge witch who had done their work for them, and I watched the shrug die on every one of their faces, exactly as she'd said it would, exactly as I'd sworn it would. She did not read from a paper, she could not. She spoke the ledger she'd carried in her head for 4 years. She named the wagons and the nights and the dark roads, and against each one from the crowd of freed women behind her, a voice would say yes, the miller's wife, the Salt Flat sisters, the old grandmother who'd gone out for reeds. She named Balger's factors and their smiling papers. She named the roads Rennick had left dark, week by week, and matched them to his own watch orders that Bevan now laid open on the council table, and there was not a lord in that hall who could go on pretending the pattern was chance. And at the last, when it was done, when Rennick stood gray and finished, and Balger's chain of gold had been lifted from his neck and thrown down on the stones, Sorrel turned to the whole silent hall, and she said the only thing in all of it that she'd asked me leave to say. My sister Wren walked to the reed beds on a road she'd walked her whole life, and this trade took her, and this country decided that made it hers to bear. It was never hers to bear. It was yours. You are the lords of these roads. You let them stay dark. She let that sit in the silence. Then quieter, they're not dark anymore. See that they stay lit. No one shrugged. Rennick went to the deep cells to await the council's judgment, and Balger with him, and the ring, with its traitor taken and its lord unmasked, and its whole shape laid open in that hall, came apart across the season that followed, factor by factor, as 40 freed women's testimony ran through the north like a thaw. I will not pretend I felt clean about all of it. There is no clean end to a thing like that. There are only the ones you reach in time and the ones you don't, and Sorrel carries the ones she didn't the way I carry mine, and we do not lie to each other that they were saved. But the roads of Elder went safe. The wagon stopped, and that is not nothing. That is, in fact, nearly everything. I did not ask Sorrel to be my Luna in that hall. I want that set down plainly, because it is the heart of the whole matter and I'll not have it told wrong. It would have been the easy thing, the kingly thing, to turn in that great doorway with the whole council watching and name the hero of the hour my queen, and let the roar go up. And it would have been a kind of taking. It would have been me spending her courage on a crown for myself before the cheering had even died. She had walked into the worst place in my kingdom alone. She did not need a king to make her worth known by marrying her in front of his lords. Her worth was known. It was standing in my hall in a green-stained shawl making a whole council ashamed. So I waited. A hard man is not always a fool. I sent the freed women home with an escort and a king's writ that no reeve would ever again call a taken woman's fate her own to bear. I saw Thistledown made a free village under my own protection, and its healer's house rebuilt in good stone, larger, because she would need the room. And then I went alone without a crown, and I stood in her rebuilt garden among the new rue, and when she came out with a rushlight and that same steady gray look, I did not command and I did not proclaim. I told her the truth, that at the tree line, 2 days into the elder wood, my wolf had crossed a whole kingdom to hunt her and had lain down instead and been home. That I had told my counsel for 11 years I would take no Luna and had believed it and been wrong. That I was not asking her to be a queen, that I would not spend her that way, but that I was asking her, a healer to a hunter, freely, with every door in the world open behind her, whether she might choose a hard, gray king who had failed his roads until she taught him how to keep them. She was quiet a long time. Her hands for once were still. "I've spent 4 years," she said at last, "not trusting a single wolf. Learning to read your kind's true face so none of you could ever take from me again what the first ones took." She stepped close in the dark and did the thing she'd done that night by her hearth, laid 2 fingers against the old wound in my leg, healed clean now, healed straight, her work. "I read yours at my own door with a knife in my hand," she said. "I've read it every day since, and it's the only wolf's face I've ever met that I'd turn my back on." She looked up. "That's not nothing, my lord. From me, that's very near everything." "Torin," I said, "there's no lord's title after it, not to you." "Torin," she said, and smiled, and it was the first time I ever saw her do it without a wound somewhere on her, and I have spent the years since making sure it was not the last. "She is Luna of Elder now, and the lords who once called a village herb woman beneath their notice come to her with their sick children and their own old crooked wounds, because she is the finest healer in the north and does not hold their year of shrugging against them, which is its own kind of largeness I will never match. But that is not the thing I keep. Kings keep too many grand things. They lose the small true one at the center. The thing I keep is this. In the great door of the gray hall of Elder, every night, my Luna sets a lamp burning in the high window that faces west toward the elder wood, the same small lamp she carried into the salt house, the same one she lit in that black window the night we broke the ring. She sets it for anyone still walking north in the dark, anyone stolen and running, anyone slow and poor and unmissed, so that they will see, a long way off across a hard land, that there is one house in Elder where the door is open and the road is lit, and no one will ever be afraid again. She spent her whole life lighting the dark for strangers, alone with a paring knife, while the rest of us shrugged. Now the whole kingdom carries the lamp with her. And I, who told my counsel I was too hard a man for a hard land to have any room in me, come to the high window each night and stand beside her while she lights it, a wolf who crossed a kingdom to hunt her and lay down instead. And I watch the small gold light go out across the dark toward the wood, and I think that of all the things a king can be remembered for, the battles held, the borders kept, I would trade every one of them to be remembered only as the hunter who came to a healer's door meaning to question her, and stayed to hold her lamp.